Peter B. Collins.
Peter B. Collins, news and comments. It's Friday, February 24th, 2017. The White House Chief of Staff and top officials at the FBI have been scheming over how to counter those reports about Russian influence on the Trump campaign and the Trump administration. Thanks for joining me today, and we do feed this live on Facebook on Fridays, 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 o'clock Eastern. And if you're new to my podcast, I'm a veteran radio guy, and I have too many opinions. And every day I do a podcast that's about a half an hour long, covering roughly 10 of the most important stories according to me. I can't possibly cover everything, and I don't pretend that what I do is comprehensive. But I do try to relate to you the stories that I think are important and that I have something to add to. And this collusion between Reince Priebus, the White House Chief of Staff, and two top officials at the FBI, including Director James Comey, is deeply troubling. And you can tell by this that I've been covering news and politics since Watergate and the Nixon administration. And following Watergate, rules were put into place to prevent inappropriate contact between White House officials and the FBI, particularly related to an ongoing investigation. And James Comey has violated that protocol repeatedly, going back to when he revealed that he wasn't going to pursue a prosecution of Hillary Clinton. That was last July 6th or 7th. Then the two comments that surfaced in October, right before the election, that did, I believe, have a negative impact on Hillary Clinton's electability. And so the latest is that in a conversation at the White House between Deputy Director Andrew McCabe and the White House Chief of Staff, Priebus, McCabe allegedly said that there was nothing to the New York Times reports that it says are based on 9 present or former intelligence officials that claim that there was frequent contact between members of the Trump campaign and people aligned with Trump, and we're told unnamed officials in the Russian intelligence community. Now, as you know, I'm skeptical of these reports because, like the whole system of claims about Russian interference, there's no proof offered. We have no evidence. And without naming the Russian officials, well, the FBI story is highly incomplete. The New York Times story is highly incomplete. So, Andrew McCabe says, well, there's really nothing to it in a private conversation with Priebus. Then Priebus follows up and says, well, can you help us tamp down these stories? We need to knock them down because, it's a distraction and it undermines the credibility of the Trump administration. Now, both of these contacts, both of these conversations are inappropriate. And there was a follow-up conversation between McCabe and Priebus, and then the FBI director himself, Comey, called Priebus to say, no, we can't help you there. Now, these are people, including Priebus, who could be persons of interest in the FBI investigation that we're told is ongoing. And Ali Soufan, who used to work for the FBI and earned some good cred because he opposed torture, and he was a guy who conducted interrogations the old-fashioned way. Ali Soufan says, as an FBI agent, we always know there shouldn't be any appearance of political interference over a pending investigation. Any kind of appearance of political influence will be considered against existing protocols and procedures. And Michael German, also a retired FBI special agent, says it is illegal for an FBI employee to take information from an ongoing criminal investigation and share it with a potential witness or subject of the investigation. Obviously, if the Justice Department ultimately initiates a prosecution in this matter, this purported conversation would be exculpating evidence. Again, if it is true that high bureau officials believe the current FBI investigation is bullshit, They should close the investigation and be prepared to justify this decision, not leak their opinion to anyone outside the investigation. Senator Ron Wyden, Democrat of Oregon. If, as Priebus claimed, he says, the FBI not only discussed this issue with the White House, but coordinated the White House's public statements, the American people would also have reason to doubt the impartiality, both of the Bureau and the Department of Justice to which the FBI is responsible. These claims deserve further investigation. So this is another stinker inside the Beltway. And we deserve answers. And I continue my criticism of James Comey and his management of the FBI. McCabe never should have dropped that comment to Reince Priebus, and Priebus should have known better than to make those follow-up phone calls. We'll see where it goes, but like so much in Washington today, it gets lost in the shuffle of the other issues that are front and center, like immigration. I will note that today is Friday, and Trump told us a week ago or it was a week ago Thursday at that rambling news conference, that by Tuesday, he thought, we were going to see the new executive order with the travel ban and immigration restrictions. We still await that, but on a visit to Mexico by Rexon Tillerson, the Secretary of State, and former General John Kelly, the Director of Homeland Security now, Kelly went out of his way to basically dismiss comments that were made by his boss, President Trump. In particular, John Kelly said there will be no mass deportations, and inferring a rebuttal of Trump's claim at a business meeting, a meeting with business executives on Thursday, Kelly went out of his way to say that this is not a military operation. Well, we'll see about that in a moment. But also, they asked the Mexican counterparts if they would be willing to house people who are deported from the United States because they're undocumented and they have crossed our border and they are not Mexican citizens. So, somebody comes from Guatemala or El Salvador. They make it all the way through Mexico. They ride on the roof of that train. They get to the border. They get across. Then they are ejected from the United States. And we're saying, well, can't you put them up at a Motel 7? And the Mexicans very clearly said no. According to their Interior Secretary named Osorio Chong, they asked us that while their legal process is happening there, if they could be here. And we told them that there's no way we can have them here during that process. So we're getting very conflicting commentary from the frontline cabinet officers of the Trump administration. This claim, a quote from Kelly, there will be no use of military forces in immigration. There will be no, repeat, no mass deportations. Now, of course, what does that mean? What constitutes a mass deportation? Is it thousands of people rounded up on a single day and deported? Or is it the aggregate number? And I keep pointing out that Barack Obama was presiding over more than 2.5 million deportations while he was president. Now, here's one example, and I do not claim that this is mass deportation. But when you look at the pattern of the more aggressive behavior by ICE, the Immigrations and Customs Enforcement crews, it does amount to the early stages of mass deportation. And let me take you just down the coast to Santa Cruz, California. It is a sanctuary city, and there's a long-running problem with the MS-13 gang. So the police chief in Santa Cruz, working with the counterparts at ICE, and the police chief's name is Vogel, Kevin Vogel. He said that he was assured that the raids on the gang members would not be expanded to include any kind of immigration bust. Here's a quote from the deputy police chief. He said that the task force met on February 9th. He was assured repeatedly by federal officials that immigration status had no role in this probe. Only after they rounded up the alleged gang members, they also took 11 other people, and either took them into custody or wrote them tickets to appear in court later. So this is aggressive, and it is described as a betrayal. Police Chief Vogel saying, "This has violated the trust of our community, and we cannot tell you how disappointed we are by the betrayal of the Department of Homeland Security." Now, why do they have a sanctuary city in Santa Cruz? Because they have thousands of undocumented residents, and they want those residents to turn in gang members who might be Latino. And without that support, and without the knowledge of local undocumenteds that the Santa Cruz police force is not in collusion with ICE, they know that their community will be less safe. And Trump has promised us he's going to make America safe again, but he doesn't take into account what his aggressive, draconian, and wrong-headed policies actually lead to. Now, the neighboring county just north of Santa Cruz is Santa Clara County. That's the seat of Silicon Valley and San Jose. You have to excuse me, I'm working with a cold today. Santa Clara County officials have asked a federal judge to impose a nationwide preliminary injunction against President Trump's executive order threatening to withhold federal funds from sanctuary jurisdictions. They call the move extortion by the White House. It's also in conflict with a Supreme Court decision from a couple of years ago that says you can't withhold funds for one purpose because a jurisdiction is not in compliance with some other issue. Now, in Santa Clara County, they get nearly $1.7 billion a year in various federal funds. Now, some of that is Medicare and Medicaid that is mandated, but it amounts to about 35% of the county budget. And they estimate that there are 20,000 to 50,000 undocumented people in Santa Clara County today. Meanwhile, Jeff Sessions, I'm sorry, it's so hard to connect Jeff Sessions with Attorney General. But that's what he is, and that's what the Senate did. They foisted him on us. Anyway, he has rescinded an order that came out of the Obama administration about 6 months ago, which was intended to phase out the use of corporate prisons in this country. These for-profit prisons are often used to detain immigrants, and they are a scandal. There is profiteering that goes on because they are guaranteed payments for a certain number of beds every night, whether there is someone in that bed or not. And they manage the prisons in a much more punitive and a less safe way. They cut corners on food, on medical care. It is a gross injustice and truly un-American. And it is to the credit of the Justice Department under the Obama administration that they made the decision to phase them out. But that's another reversal by Trump. Today I'm releasing an in-depth interview to my subscribers at peterbcollins.com, at iTunes, TuneIn, Stitcher, Spreaker, wherever you find my podcasts. Well, you can listen to an in-depth interview with Professor Trevor Scholz from the New School in New York. He just published a new book called Overworked and Underpaid, subtitled How Workers Are Disrupting the Digital Economy. And I had a fascinating conversation with him, particularly because Uber made some news, and they aren't happy about it this week. There is a sexual harassment report from a woman who quit the engineering department at Uber after they attempted to hire more women to diversify their workforce. And just today, Google's autonomous car division called Waymo filed a federal lawsuit against Uber, claiming that they have stolen intellectual property related to autonomous vehicles. Here's an excerpt from my conversation with Professor Scholz, where he talks about the fundamentals of these so-called disruptive tech startups, and that fundamentally they operate outside the law.
Yeah, they come into cities and companies like Uber, but also TaskRabbit, you name it, Handy, and often break a lot of laws. I mean, so there's a sort of nullification of federal law and local regulations, and basically operating as if they are in a legal void, and then basically creating a consumer base, and then basically holding that consumer base up and say, well, look here, these are all these happy customers, so maybe your laws are all antiquated, you're dinosaurs, you should really, change these laws so that they fit their extractive business model. And you know what, I think what's really most important about this is I think these shortcomings, we see them so clearly, right? So now we learn about the working conditions in those offices for the engineers, for the management, and we know these stories since 2014 at least about the drivers, right? So many of them are really close to minimum wage, some even below minimum wage, despite the fact that Uber in New York was spreading the news that drivers are making $100,000 a year, which, all these investigative journalists are coming out and trying to find this driver who makes $100,000 a year, of course, not finding anyone even close. And but I think much more important is like, what can you actually do about it, right? So how can you intervene in this situation? And this is also what I'm trying to do in the book, right? How can you actually intervene in this situation and bring about some positive change?
And Professor Scholz has some fascinating ideas in his new book, Overworked and Underpaid, about a co-op model for many of these so-called disruptive app-based businesses. And I encourage you to check out his book and read it if you are so inclined. And the interview will be available to my subscribers later today. I like to thank my subscribers for supporting my work here at the Peter B. Collins Podcast, and we name names like Ian Berman and Eric Bohl, Alice Carlson, and Emery Safak, who just renewed an annual subscription. Thank you all. And if you'd like to become a subscriber, it's easy. Just takes a couple of minutes. Come over to peterbcollins.com, and whatever device you're using, click on the menu button, pull it down, click on Become a Subscriber. It takes you to the sign-up page, and you can make a choice, $5, $10, $20 a month, or our $50 annual subscription. So Donald Trump went to CPAC. I believe he is the first sitting president to grace this conservative conference. And he appeared in a campaign-style rally using the same music. And I don't know why he likes You Can't Always Get What You Want by the Rolling Stones so much. It's kind of ruined one of my favorite classics from the Stones. But he continued his relentless attack on the media. And keep in mind that I led today with the story about the White House and how they wanted to get the FBI to back them up, that there's no basis for this claim that Russia was connected or communicating with the Trump campaign and had some role in the outcome of our election. And at one point, Reince Priebus got the FBI the number 2 guy to agree that he could say that anonymous intelligence officials have debunked this claim. So the White House, even today, issued some statements where they said that you cannot attribute it. You must say this is from a senior White House official. So listen to Donald Trump as he trashes the use of anonymous sources.
A few days ago, I called the fake news the enemy of the people, and they are. They are the enemy of the people. Because they have no sources, they just make them up when there are none. I saw one story recently where they said 9 people have confirmed. There are no 9 people. I don't believe there was 1 or 2 people. 9 people. And I said, give me a break, because I know the people. I know who they talk to. There were no 9 people, but they say 9 people. And somebody reads it and they think, oh, 9 people, they have 9 sources. They make up sources. They're very dishonest people. In fact, in covering my comments, the dishonest media did not explain that I called the fake news the enemy of the people, the fake news. They dropped off the word fake.
Oh.
And all of a sudden, the story became the media is the enemy. They take the word fake out. And now I'm saying, oh, no, this is no good. But that's the way they are. And I am only against the fake news media or press. Fake.
He's only against the fake news. You got that?
I'm against the people.
Now, what about anonymous sources,
and make
Donald?
up sources. They shouldn't be allowed to use sources unless they use somebody's name. Let their name be put out there. Let their name be put out.
So this is the height of hypocrisy. His White House, like every White House before, uses unattributed administration officials who leak stuff on a regular basis with impunity. They don't face Leavenworth like Chelsea Manning or exile like Ed Snowden. And so Trump's attack is so hypocritical. It is par for the course. And what he did do is threaten to do something about it. And I don't know exactly what that means. He started railing about the First Amendment, and that's when I kind of lost interest. But it's interesting to see that 86% of Democrats, when polled last week, said that they trust the media more to tell the truth than Donald Trump. 78% of Republicans say they trust Trump more than the media. So his attacks on the media are working with his Republican base, and that in and of itself is distressing. Meanwhile, there is a Democratic gathering underway in Atlanta, Georgia, and on Saturday, the delegates, the members of the Democratic National Committee, including the superdelegates who blew the election last year by supporting the damaged candidate Hillary Clinton, they are meeting to choose a new chair. And Hillary sent a video. And her video says, "Let resistance plus persistence equal progress for our party and our country. Keep fighting," she said. "I'll be right there with you every step of the way." Well, Hillary, let's don't and say we did. Can we? I mean, you've had your opportunity twice to run for president, and you failed. And your policies, your corporate-fueled and funded policies, are a failure. And I'm linking in the show file today's podcast that you can find at peterbcollins.com to a great breakdown written by Glenn Greenwald over at The Intercept. And he notes that there is a proxy war between the two leading candidates for chair, and they are Tom Perez, the former Obama Labor Secretary, and Congressman Keith Ellison from Minnesota, the only Muslim in the House of Representatives. Now, I'll be clear, I favor Ellison for his politics and because I've met him and talked with him many times, and he's been extremely honest with me. And that is a characteristic that we need to overcome the history of Debbie Wasserman Schultz and Donna Brazile. Also, Keith Ellison will clearly take the party in a more progressive direction, and that distresses Alan Dershowitz so much that he has repeated his threat that if Ellison is named chair, that he will leave the Democratic Party. And don't let that door hit you on the way out, Alan. So what Greenwald does is a great exposition of the underlying politics here, and that this is a battle that is really being waged about the role of Haim Saban. He is an out-Zionist, very open and honest about it, and he has said that Keith Ellison, borrowing a word from Trump, would be a disaster for the relationship between the Jewish community and the Democratic Party. Now, I supported Keith Ellison's work on the Democratic Committee's platform committee last summer as he tried in vain to get issues related to Israel and Palestine and a ban on fracking and opposition to the TPP into the Democratic platform. But he was thwarted by the people who are loyal to the element of the party, the wing of the party, that supports Haim Saban. And Saban donated $7 million to build the DNC headquarters. He's given $15 million to the Clinton Foundation. He dumped $10 million into the dark money super PAC of the Clinton campaign last year. And that, I would submit, is the real problem in the Democratic Party today. Now, go ahead and start a clock on me here, will you? Because last night I watched Rachel Maddow on MSDNC, and she brought up a very good story, the one I'm about to cover, and she spent about 28 minutes All right, I think I can do this perhaps in 28 seconds. The state of Montana is getting ready for a special election to replace its only member of Congress. He is Ryan Zinke, who has been named Interior Secretary in the new administration. He's not yet confirmed, but when he is, they'll schedule a special election. And because of the high cost of last year's elections, in Montana, they are pushing for a vote by mail in this special election. In fact, there is a Republican proposal that is opposed by the Republican chair to do just that. And the reason is because he thinks the Democrats might win. He says that they have an advantage in close elections due to their ability to organize large numbers of unpaid college students and members of public employee unions to gather ballots by going door to door. So this is open Republican voter suppression right there in the Big Sky State. Here in California yesterday, there was a problem, a scene, in the state Senate. The day before, the body had paid tribute to the late Tom Hayden. And yesterday, we mentioned Hayden's memorial service over the weekend and great coverage of it by the San Francisco Chronicle's David Talbot. But a member of the Republican Party, a state senator who is a Vietnamese refugee, Janet Nguyen, spelled Nguyen, she decided not to speak up while Hayden's family was there for the memorial, but the next day during a part of the proceedings, she spoke first in Vietnamese and then started in English. And she was slamming Tom Hayden for his visits to North Vietnam during the American War in Vietnam. So on Thursday afternoon, she criticized Hayden because he chose to work directly with the communist North Vietnamese government to oppose the efforts of the United States in South Vietnam that enslaved or killed millions of Vietnamese, including members of my own family. Now, I think she has a right to say this. And the person who was chairing the session gavelled her to silence over a dozen times. He called on her to sit down, and when she refused, the sergeants at arms grabbed her by the arms and removed her from the room, from the podium as well. And just as I opposed the U.S. Senate's effort to silence Elizabeth Warren, I do oppose this effort. I think she may have staged this looking for the publicity it has generated. But in any event, I think she should have been permitted to speak. Meanwhile, a senator in the Philippines, a woman named Leila de Lima, who has been a bitter critic of the Duterte government for its vigilante justice and the unauthorized, extra-legal killings of alleged drug users and drug dealers. Well, to silence her, Duterte has charged her with taking bribes from drug traffickers. Now, she denies this. She says these are all lies. The truth will come out at the right time. If they think they can stop me from fighting these daily murders, they are wrong. And I offer this as an example of what may come to pass here in the United States. That we're going to have some people who speak out against the injustices and the overreaches of Trump and his allies, and they will face trumped-up charges in proceedings like we see starting up in the Philippines. And let's go from the Philippines to Sweden, shall we? Because in the teeny-weeny town of, what is it called? Övertorneå, a 42-year-old member of the council named Per-Erik Muskos is proposing that the 550 people who work for the town be offered 1 paid hour off a week to go home and have sex. Now, the councilman says that they have a dwindling population. He wants to promote fertility and childbearing. He also said that it could spice up aging marriages. It can improve employee morale. Sex is also a great form of exercise and has documented positive effects on well-being. So, in this Swedish town, you not only have a right to a great orgasm, but you can stay on the payroll while you're humping at home. Thanks for joining me today for my News and Comment podcast. Today, live on Facebook, every day available to you on all my outlets, including YouTube. And I welcome your feedback. You can email Peter at peterbcollins.com.
Happy trails to you until we meet again. Happy trails to you. Keep smiling until then.